A few years ago, I wanted to learn Godot engine. I knew that if I wanted to, I would be making a 2D platformer due to how easy they are to make, and because this would be both my first time making a game and learning an engine and learning a Godot engine, so it would just be good to start with something very, very simple. Specifically, I wanted to make a game similar to classic Mega Man. There were several games that are based off of Mega Man X, like 20XX and 30XX and Gravity Circuit, but none that I've seen that are based off of classic Mega Man. And while I do really like Mega Man X and those other games, there's a different feeling to a Mega Man X game as opposed to a classic Mega Man game. And I really want to make a game that was more similar to classic Mega Man, that's slower and focused on platforming and shooting than the faster gameplay of Mega Man X type titles. And I then went to school for video game design, where we had a project where we had to make a game using any game engine that we wanted to. So I decided this would be the perfect opportunity to learn Godot engine, make this simple platformer, and get a grade for it. And I would do this. I would call it Cosmic Rays, and I got a good grade on it. I thought that it was a fine enough 2D platformer. I didn't really have any big issues with it, but I do think that the third level was incredibly rushed in terms of art style, level design, and difficulty. But I think that the concept was cool, and I think the boss was also very rushed. It didn't work sometimes, and just conceptually it just didn't really work, which I'll get into more later on. But I thought overall it was good, but I would like to come back to it at some point and fix the issues and make it more complete. As I thought about also how to make the game better, because of the Mega Man roots that it has, I wanted to maybe implement sub-weapons, but there is only one boss, so instead you would get the weapons of the enemies. But, to not make it super overpowered, you would get crafting materials, and then you'd be able to craft their weapons or something like that. A year later, I had to make another game. This one had to be 3D. The only ideas that I could think of had to do with anthropomorphic animals, and I didn't feel like outing to my teacher that I was a furry. So back to Cosmic Rays it was. I decided to implement the crafting mechanic because why not? I thought it would be interesting to try to do. But the biggest thing, which was honestly really cool, was coming up with a new plot, because this was supposed to be a sequel that happened right after the first game, and so trying to figure out why things happened was actually pretty cool. It led me to come up with a more complex plot than what was originally there in the first Cosmic Rays. This would also allow me to create new levels and enemies and mechanics and whatnot. So while a lot of Cosmic Rays 2 was not going to be used because it's 3D, it at least got some ideas and kind of made me think, oh, I probably have enough now to maybe actually make a complete version that feels like a full game. The first two levels were already basically completed from the first version of Cosmic Rays, and because of how long it took me to record this, I have completed 4 more levels and 2 bosses since then. The first 2 levels I didn't really change too much, just because I think that they were just solid enough levels. I think that the first level is a good introduction where it's very open and it kind of teaches you how to jump and also the jumping physics and whatnot, and also how the enemies are introduced so that you understand how they shoot and whatnot before it gets trickier and trickier throughout. Not to mention that the level is also very open. You don't have to worry about ceilings, so jumps are relatively very easy. Not to mention that there aren't really any bottomless pits in the level, so you can kind of make a lot of mistakes. This is until the end of the level where there are a lot of bottomless pits in a row, which is a little bit of a difficulty spike, but I think it's a good way of checking if the player is prepared for level 2 and the rest of the game. I was originally going to discuss the enemies in their levels when they show up, but I think it's better to explain the enemies all as a whole, as I designed each of them with the other enemies in mind. Level 2 I feel like is a good jump in difficulty because there's now more bottomless pit jumps, and also there are now ceilings for you to worry about, so sometimes you might need to worry about how you're going to make a jump or how you're going to dodge a projectile. There were 2 parts that were reworked from the original level 2. There was one in which there were 2 branching pathways, where there was an easier one and then one that was harder but would give you a health pack that would give you 5 health. This was so early into the level that it wouldn't really be that useful for most players. So I decided to just make it a branching pathway between 2 different types of enemies, and so it's not as interesting, but I think it makes more sense as to where it is in the level. The second thing that I removed was a jump at the end of the level. You would have to bait an enemy to shoot at you and then make the jump, because otherwise when you tried to make the jump, you would then get hit by the projectile and then be in hit stun and then die into the bottomless pit. I think it is a really cool idea for a jump, but I think that it's just a little bit too much for really the normal mode of this game, and especially for the second level. I probably will put this back when it comes to hard mode, but when it comes to normal mode, I think this is just, it's way too much to expect a player to know about something like baiting a projectile, especially at the end of the level where if you die, you're going back to the beginning and losing 2 or 3 minutes of progress at minimum, but it could have taken you way longer to try to get to that point just to then be sent back, which would be terrible. So I think for this, it was a good decision to remove that, even if I think it was kind of cool. And its DNA sort of still exists due to you still having to make a jump, but all that jump does is make you take 2 damage if you don't bait the projectile instead of instant death. And now we get to level 3. Level 3 is completely different. This level was going to have to be reworked, first of all because the factory setting just didn't really make that much sense once the plot changes happened, as originally this was supposed to be the home planet of the snake people and whatnot, until the plot changes basically made it to where the snake people were just like overtaken by this brain thing. So for this it made more sense for the brain to be like taking over this cave and whatnot, which is the first thing that I wanted to do. The second thing is that for a 3-level game, level 3 made a lot of sense, being just so long and so difficult. It was like twice the length of the other levels and just is insane. It's the only level that when replaying Cosmic Rays, I still die and have trouble on, which made sense as the final level, but now it's being stuck in as the end of the first third of the game. At that point, not only was it already a massive difficulty spike, but either every single level after that would have to be just as or more difficult than that level, which would be a lot. Or you have this weird point in the game where it's just really difficult and then it goes back to being normal again. And while balancing it could have been a little easy, there were some points where there were just like a lot of enemies on the screen, and maybe toning those down could help. But the length couldn't really be fixed. Yes, you could cut out a part of the level, but I felt as though the level was building up to that final tower segment and the boss fight. But despite how long it was just like continuously building up to this point where it just kept going and going. And if you cut out a part of the level, then it would feel very abrupt, as if it didn't build up fully because you had cut out one of the parts of the build up. This could just be me knowing what the level originally looked like, as opposed to what most people would think because they have not seen the original version of the level. But still, I wanted to remake this level with these new ideas in mind. So, welcome, it's super claustrophobic now. Originally I wanted the entire level to be just like gaps that are just big enough for you, but I realized that this results in some pretty boring platforming pretty quickly, and decided to have parts that were more spacious. Despite this, most of the level still is very cramped. I not only wanted it to be an extension of level 2, which had low ceilings, but even more so now, but I also wanted it to feel very weird and different. No other level in the game is going to have these cramped hallways, so I felt like it would make it feel like you're in a place you're not really supposed to be in. It also made it harder to dodge bullets, meaning that you had to backtrack sometimes in order to have the bullets pass by instead of just being able to jump over them. Again, getting into this sort of feel that this is a very different type of level than what you're going to be experiencing after and before. I worded that weirdly. And now we have the boss fight, the other part of the previous version I didn't really like that much. It had a couple of problems. First of all, the tentacle attack was buggy. It would sometimes come down and then not come back up like it's supposed to. Probably if I looked through the code, I would probably figure out what exactly was happening there. But honestly, I knew I was going to scrap this, so I didn't even bother to try to fix it. The second issue is that it doesn't really feel like you're fighting him. The two main ways you're going to be taking damage is either the cannons on the sides or the tentacle attacks, both of which aren't from the boss itself. The cannons are just firing at you. They are completely a secondary source of damage. And while the tentacles are sort of being sent down by the boss, they're not coming from the boss itself, and you can see them at the top of the screen. It's very clear that it's more just coming down. So it doesn't really feel like the boss is attacking you with these attacks, it more so just feels like the tentacles are attacking you. Thusly, it didn't really feel like you were fighting the boss, but you were fighting all of these things around the boss, and the boss was just a moving, like, target, rather than an actual enemy you were supposed to be fighting against. Honestly, I don't mind that as a concept for a boss and think it could be pretty cool, but it's not what I was thinking for this boss and not what I wanted. Lastly, it was way too RNG dependent. This is because of one of its attacks where it put up these shields, and if you hit the shields then it would fire a projectile back at you. This is a fine enough attack, but it could put it up at any moment, meaning you could have shot at the boss and it puts up the shield after you have shot and then shoots a projectile back at you, and you get hit despite the fact that at the time that you shot it was completely safe to shoot him. So not only was it annoying, but it also made fights drag on longer. And the longer that the fight dragged on, the more damage that you were more likely to take. Essentially, if the boss spammed the hell out of the shields, then it would be way harder to defeat him, but if he just didn't use the shields, then it was just really, really easy. Like, there were times where I would lose to the boss because it spammed the shields all the time, and then the next attempt it wouldn't use the shields at all, and I would beat it damageless. A boss like that is pretty bad because it's completely reliant on just if you get the shields or not, and I wanted something more interesting than that. I will say, in the original version of Cosmic Rays, none of the enemies had hurt boxes, and so because of the boss didn't either, and it did feel really cool to go in between the two shields and pump the boss just full of bullets. That was really cool, but it wouldn't really make sense in this version because now the enemies do have hurt boxes, and so then the boss suddenly not having them would be strange. Now you could try to weave in between the boss and the shield, but that is insane. It would be really cool, but just no, that should not be a thing that you should have to do in a boss fight. So I removed all of the external things, the tentacles and the cannons, and also made the room flat. This was because of an attack idea that I had later that would be kind of a pain if there were platforms, though it wouldn't be impossible. He almost exclusively shoots at you now. 3 of his attacks are based off of like bullet hell type of stuff, which introduces kind of a new thing to the game that hasn't been explored yet. Yes, there has been dodging of projectiles, but not to this degree yet in the game, and I think that's interesting, especially for a boss fight. Plus, these bullets also change their direction sometimes when they are fired. This makes for some weirder patterns and means that you can't just deal with every single version of this attack the same way. I think it just makes this attack just way more interesting, but also I feel like these attacks are really hard to dodge, but also like the least intimidating because it's just kind of shooting kind of everywhere instead of specifically at you, unlike the next 3 attacks. 2 of them, he goes on the side of the screen and shoots until he gets to the other side of the screen and then does another attack. This does feel like he's hunting you down. The last one is where he goes up and then he goes to your position and shoots down at you. This one also feels like he's specifically targeting you and specifically hunting you down. Despite how intimidating these attacks are, they're all really easy to dodge. You just have to go the direction that he's going in the ones where he goes across the screen and you like almost never get hit. and you basically just have to be moving in one direction and you never get hit by the other one. Despite this, I feel like they're really good additions. Not only is it good to have some easier attacks that still keep you on your feet next to the other more difficult attacks, but they make it feel like he is actually trying to attack you. And again, it makes him feel more intimidating even if the attacks actually are not that difficult to dodge. But all of these attacks, he's in the air. You cannot hit him. The last 3 attacks allow him to be hit by your bullets. 2 of them he will slide across the ground, and these were the ones where I didn't want to have platforms, because then I have to have him like go across the outline of the platform, and there'd just be more tweens and whatnot, and just be annoying. The other one is where he gets really big and then slams down on the ground trying to hit you, and he goes to where your X position is. If he collides with you in any of these attacks, he will do 3 damage to you. So these are the most damage dealing moves, but they're also fairly easy to dodge. Honestly, the one where he slams down to the ground is the hardest one for me to dodge. But also you can get 5 hits in if you're good. But because only 3 of his attacks allow him to get hit, I made it so that once he uses 5 attacks in a row where you can't hit him, he will then use an attack where you can hit him. He can, of course, use an attack where you can hit him before that, but if at the absolute worst he chooses 5 attacks where you can't hit him, he has to choose one as a 6 attack. Not to mention, the attacks are not very long, so it's not uncommon to have 5 attacks go by pretty quickly. And while this can create the problem of fights getting harder due to him choosing to just make it last longer, and thusly the difficulty can be sort of swayed due to RNG, I feel like getting hit and dodging these attacks is way more under the player's control than in the original version, to where it's not as unfair when it goes on longer because the attack was more fair to dodge, and so each hit feels more like your fault, and so you can kind of go on forever if you are good enough. While in the other version, it sometimes just felt like you lost because the game decided that you lost. Level 4 was when I wanted to start introducing some stage gimmicks to the game as well. This is where vines are introduced, which are a semi-solid platform. Basically, any idea that I had with the vines I decided to do. Sure, the vines are coming from the ceiling now. Sure, the leaves are coming out of the platform now. Sure, let's have it on a moving platform at the end of the level. I also think that the difficulty, jumped up pretty well, where you had to start thinking about which leaves to jump on. I'm also proud of the vine since it was the first time of me making a tool script without using a tutorial. Speaking of making a tool script using a tutorial, level 5. I was finally gonna do the factory level again since I took it out of level 3. This time I was going to do the actual thing that I wanted to do for level 3 that I couldn't figure out when I made it originally for the school assignment, which was having an animated thing where lights were going through the platforms. For whatever reason, this would never line up correctly when I tried to do it the first time, and so I just created these bars that were just there, which was kind of interesting to have a foreground element which would restrict your vision, but overall it's pretty annoying. But now I had it actually realized, and it looked nice, I liked it. But the other thing that I wanted in this stage was moving platforms. I didn't know how to make moving platforms, so I used a tutorial by Game Endeavor to make this happen. So a big thank you to him and his tutorial, because I probably would not have figured out how to make this happen without him. I would then modify the script a little bit to allow for platforms to start moving only when you step on them. This was for specific sections, and I didn't want it to just be moving all the time, because when you got to that section, not only would you have to wait then for the platform to then come over to you, but for the first time that you see this, you may not really understand why you can't progress anymore, and why you might see the platform come down and pick you up. I still didn't want to have that confusion in the first place, so having it so that you would step on it and then it would move is a better solution than just hoping that people understood and also forcing people to wait. When I started making this level, I really didn't have like any ideas, so I decided to also make doors and keys for some more interesting stuff. I didn't really do much with this concept, but I am glad that it still was here, and I think it made the level a little bit more interesting and have some interesting ideas that maybe I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. I wanted level 6 to be this area of like, this is like the king's chamber, and like apparent that like you're not supposed to be here and nobody else is supposed to be here either. Because of this, no enemies were going to be in this level. It was only going to be environmental hazards. Yes, it does mean bottomless pits, but also I decided to put in some gears or saws that will hurt you, and also lasers. I was pretty sure that the lasers would use a raycast of some sort, but I had no idea on how to make that visible, how to make an actual like line from the beginning to the end point of the raycast and whatnot. So I did use another tutorial, this time by GD Quest, so thank you to them for their tutorial as well, as it also helped. When you get to the end of the 6th stage, you are then put into a cutscene where you are then given a choice to continue to defend Earth or to join the attack on Earth. If you continue to defend Earth, then you will fight the king. I wanted this boss to both feel different from the first boss, but I also wanted this boss to be really big. So he's completely stationary, but still will shoot you with his arms. But because he's really big, you have to get to the top of him and then shoot his head. This is done by using the moving platforms in order to get up to his head, while he is simultaneously shooting at you. It is also really easy to fall off of these platforms and then take unnecessary damage and have to get back up again. For his attacks, I wanted, again, more bullet hell style attacks, and I also wanted the laser beams to be a big focus of his attacks as well, as I think they look cool and they make him look more intimidating as well. Also, the one where he shoots 2 of them is a bitch to dodge. I also wanted to implement the gears somehow. I decided that he would be able to place down the gears and they would then slowly rotate across the entire screen. This means that you could slowly get more and more gears as the fight goes on if he chooses to put more gears down. Also, since he has to go and put gears down, it also gives you a small break from projectiles in order to put more bullets, but in the long term it puts more gears for you to dodge, as you will hit your head on them at the top and you will get hit by them at the bottom as well. By the time that I made all the attacks though, there still was just too few attacks, and I decided to add one more type of attacks. He can now shoot a bullet, which will hit a wall and explode into more bullets. This is just kind of an original thing, not from any other enemy, like other attacks that I've done, but I think it's really cool and I think it's interesting to dodge. It is a little bit too difficult to dodge, especially when he shoots 2 of them, so this might be something that I may need to nerf, especially during playtesting. Yeah, it gives him more stuff to do. Now that we're done with everything so far, when it comes to levels, let's talk about all the enemies and my thought process between them all. Why did I pause it? The snake guy, also known as the Red Viper, is an enemy which shoots 3 times, meaning that it's a little bit difficult to dodge all 3 projectiles, that you can jump over them, but sometimes you aren't going to be able to do that. What I wanted to do for all the enemies is to not have one just be a upgrade from another one. This was a good way of having an enemy that shoots in front of them, while it being interesting throughout all of the levels. As if you just shot 1 projectile, then it would be pretty boring, and while it could be easily scalable to be like, oh, well now this one does 3 damage, I didn't want to have clone enemies. Not to mention, if it only shot 1 projectile, then it would be completely replaced by the next enemy. The cannon, I suppose. I actually don't have really an official name for it. It shoots in 3 directions, meaning that it can both shoot you directly in front of itself, but it also shoots diagonally, which means sometimes it'll shoot you down a staircase. This also means that when you were jumping over the center projectile, you could sometimes get bonked in the head. Overall, I think it's a good enemy that is versatile in a lot of different ways, and allows for a lot of interesting different things throughout each level. The last enemy is It moves and it shoots in 8 directions at some points. And while I think it's cool, it is difficult to design a level with it in mind due to the fact that it moves. But I do still think that it's an interesting enemy, and it's hard to hit, and it can sometimes be a bit of a nuisance, which I think is pretty good for an enemy like this. The next one is this little guy that crawls on the ceiling and shoots stuff at you. Honestly, it's pretty hard to hit him, and I don't really put him in any other stages just because he either doesn't fit or it's just, I don't know. He's weird. I do like him, and he introduces a vertical attack as opposed to a horizontal attack, but he feels a little weird, but I do like him. The other one is a variant to the Red Viper. He's green now, and he holds a shield which blocks projectiles, meaning you have to hit him from behind. To compensate for this, he only shoots a projectile every 5 seconds, but it does do 2 damage instead of 1, so it's less frequent, but the projectile can hurt, and you have to deal with it in a different way. I think that he is different enough to the Red Viper to where there's a reason to use both of them in different level design ideas. The third level introduces 2 more enemies, one of which is just a leftover from the earlier version of the boss. But I think it's interesting because it can't take damage and it's just kind of there and you never see it again. It's just a weird enemy. The other one was sort of a rework to the 8-shooter. Well, I didn't want to just have a stationary version of the 8-shooter since it would just be a better version of that. I decided to get a bit of a compromise. It still shoots in 8 directions, but only shoots in 4 directions at one time, then rotates and shoots in the other 4 directions. Doing all 8 directions, but being a little bit more interesting. And I will use this enemy more often since it's easier to place a stationary enemy than one that's moving in a level. Level 4 introduces the Reflector, which will reflect the bullet that's shot at it, but will not shoot itself. It will, however, also reflect enemy bullets. This is actually the reason why the original version of the Brain Bots had that shield attack, was to represent several different enemy types. But I decided to scrap that for the new version of the Brain Boss due to reasons I said before. I think it's interesting, but I definitely do not get, I feel like, as much mileage out of it as I did in the 3rd level where it was introduced. But part of that is because of the Red Viper shooting at it, and it's just mean. Like, I think that that's interesting, and I might do it for hard mode, but that's mean. It's mean. And I don't want to put that into a normal mode level. The last 2 enemies is the Juggernaut. The Juggernaut is a dude who swings a big mace around, or a spiked ball or something. Either way, he swings it at you and it does some damage to you. In addition, it absorbs bullets, meaning that you have to kill him before he swings it at you, or whatnot. He's a very different feeling enemy, and I made him specifically for the moving platforms in mind, because that way he can swing it and then the mace will come with him instead of the bullets being shot and they're going to just stay there while the enemy is moving around. The last one is the Homing Missile Viper, which doesn't really actually have missiles but just bullets. Either way, he shoots 3 bullets and they all go in on you. I think that it makes the counters just more interesting since there's more things to dodge and they can kind of come at you at any angle. And you can't really just avoid them by being under the enemy. And yeah, that is everything with Cosmic Rays so far. This is a long ass video because I had to cover basically everything that I had done so far. Other videos will be shorter. I'm not expecting to do anything super crazy in this game, and I'm not expecting it to be this, big thing. But I want to make a game that is both fun and also something that I haven't really seen. I haven't really seen many classic Mega Man style games. Oh yeah, there is the choice to attack Earth. What happens then? Well, there is another boss. If you do that, there's a different boss than the king. But before we do that, something else will have to be added first. Until next time. Fuck it, the ones that I'm expecting is kind of a big man like him, but it's also kind of a like control games, so I don't really know how much it really counts.